I think I might be in love with Dice Throne. So Dice Throne is a game that I have seen on board game shelves many, many times. I've always looked at the box and the art and thought, that game looks pretty fun. However, I never really knew when to introduce it to my group of friends or to start playing myself. It's not a solo game at its core, so it's not a game that I could just pick up and play myself as well. I would need to sort of introduce it to my group of friends and see what they think. And it's not a game early on in sort of my board game journey, I guess you could say, that I think that this game would have fit my group of friends because it is a competitive game first and foremost. There are team versus team modes you can play, as well as there are expansions that add cooperative elements now. However, it was designed to be a 1v1 experience at its core. And those types of games never really fit my group, I think, early on. We have had quite a bit of history with Magic the Gathering. Played quite a bit of Warhammer Kill Team as well. But they're not games that we typically really play a ton of. And even when we did play a lot of Magic the Gathering, we did lean towards more casual stuff like Commander or maybe two-headed... it's like two-headed something. I can't remember the 2v2 game mode in Magic the Gathering. It's been a long time since I played that game mode. And the main reason why is I think there is a pretty big disparity in between how we approach competitive games. If you have a group of friends who are all really into competitive stuff and they can, they understand sort of the nuances of competitive games as well as diving into strategies and stuff like that, then it's not as big of a deal. But I would say that my group of friends, I'm definitely the one that enjoys like game theory, enjoys diving into in-depth strategies behind specific mechanics and things like that. I go all out in that sense, and I can be pretty competitive, but I also am perfectly fine taking a loss, just because I think I've played enough competitive games myself where that's perfectly fine. I know a loss I don't get upset about, that kind of stuff. My group of friends, I think, don't play as many competitive games as I do to sort of get over that hump, which I think a lot of people do, especially when you have both competitive and casual players in a board game space, and you have casual players who don't play a lot of competitive stuff. They don't tend to take losses as easily, and so that's definitely one of the reasons why I'm the primary person, I think, in my group of friends that introduces new board games into the group. And it's one reason why I've shied away from games like Dice Throne and other competitive games as well, is because my main goal is to make sure everyone has a good time. And it's one of the reasons why we've always enjoyed cooperative experiences mostly. Not just because of that fact, we just enjoy cooperative stuff mainly anyways, but it's one of the reasons why I haven't introduced as much competitive stuff. But over the course of time, we've done more competitive things and played more competitive games. For example, one of my friends introduced Root into our play group, and we played a session of that and really, really loved it. I've introduced Wingspan to the group. My friends and I really, really love Epic Spell Wars Battle Wizards. This big orange box behind me, we love that one, and that one's like a more competitive game in terms of just like being head to head. And so I think throughout that, my friends have sort of been able to adopt more of a competitive mindset, I guess, and are more fine with losses. They can definitely thrive in playing it in a more casual way and not have to worry about losing or winning as much. And so when I looked more into Dice Throne, there was a Black Friday weekend sale this past weekend at my LGS. Everything, all the board games are 20% off. I obviously had to get something, and I just sort of pulled the trigger, and it was like, let's just sort of not really go all in, but let's go pretty deep in it. So I got the full Marvel 4-pack because you obviously get it at a discounted rate rather than buying everything separately, and I picked up 2 separate boxes as well. The day after that we played this past weekend, my friend actually went out himself and bought 2 more solo boxes. So we're gonna have a lot of options to play with. We're probably gonna play this upcoming weekend as well, and I actually put in a request to the publisher, Roxley, and asked them just if they want to send over either the upcoming Marvel Dice Throne Missions cooperative experience or a copy of Dice Throne Adventures for me to look at as a solo player. I would love to cover that on this channel, so if you got any connections, let me know, because they haven't responded to my email yet. But this game is a blast. My friends all had a great time. There were a couple of times where, you know, there were a little bit of sour moments, which we'll get into a little bit later. But all in all, this is a fantastic multiplayer game. I think it's definitely one of the most elegant designs I've seen in a game in terms of just picking it up and easing people into the experience. I'm very much not used to that because I am a idiot who likes to play some of the more complicated games. But you know, I love that kind of stuff. I love diving into the rule books and stuff like that. This is definitely one of those games where it's easy to pick up, hard to master. There is a lot of nuance to the game, but because with the dice elements, there is enough randomness and chance to the game where even if you have someone who's a little bit higher in skill level of the game, it doesn't mean that the person who has less skill is going to always lose. So there is definitely a good balance between the luck and the skill of the game. So let's open up a box. I'll set it up a little bit and just show you how to play it, just in case you don't know what Dice Throne is. And also, big shout out to the designers. This game's designed by Manny Tremblay, Nate Chatelier, and Gavin Brown. They did an excellent job designing this game. So yeah, I'll open up one of the hero packs and we'll dive into a little bit of Dice Throne. All right, so we have one of the characters set up and ready to go. So this is from the Pyromancer and Shadow Thief box. And again, one of these duo boxes of heroes is a complete game, which is another fantastic thing about this. So it's very, very easy to sort of just pick and choose your own characters that you really, really just enjoy. But you also just get the benefit of having two options in each complete game. So you really just need one of these to get going and get playing with some other person. Which is super, super fantastic. Not only that, each character has their own on the back complexity level that you can sort of see here. So Pyromancer is complexity 3 out of 6. The Shadow Thief is complexity 5 out of 6. The funny thing is most of the characters I picked up for this game as a new player, they're on the higher complexity level. I believe in the Marvel box, the Spider-Man is the lowest one at 2. However, like the Artificer is 6. I wouldn't worry too much about the complexity levels though. Choose a character that you just really enjoy the look of and you really get a feel for. Some of this, it's pretty self-explanatory with some of the characters in terms of how they're going to be playing. For example, Pyromancer deals with flames, is obviously going to be more focused on doing damage very, very quickly and being a little bit of a glass cannon. Shadow Thief is going to be a little bit more sneaky, maybe dealing with poisons and stuff like that. So just choose a character that you really, really like the look of, because honestly, even at our complexity level 6, my friend chose the Artificer and had no issues actually picking up the game. Obviously, when it comes down to learning the intricacies and the nuances of the character and the strategies for it, it's going to be a little bit more on the complicated side. But in terms of just picking up the character and playing, he was doing his own thing and pretty much learned the game within the first few turns. So it's very, very easy. The cool thing is every single one of these characters as well comes in their own self-contained box. So even if you don't want to, for some reason, lug around two characters in this, slightly larger box, I guess you could just choose one character, throw it in your backpack, and go to a friend's house who might own some other characters and start battling it out there. It's just extremely well packaged. Everything fits so well and so nicely in all this stuff. Definitely one of the best designed packages I've seen in a game, and from what I've seen from like Dice Throne Adventures and the other stuff, their larger boxes are also extremely well designed, where you have extra space to fit every single chit, and you have no issues with having to move things around, and it's just very, very, very well laid out. So I love how easy this game is to set up. I love how little table space it picks up. This is going to be one player's whole play area, so it's very, very straightforward, very, very easy. So in each character's box, you're going to find their main ability board. Obviously, every single character is going to be different. Every single character is going to have their own little unique mechanics. For example, the the Cursed Pirate actually has a dual-sided board where they actually have a full set of abilities on the other side, and she can actually switch between two different forms, which is very, very cool. You also have a small sort of dual-sided one-pager that will not only give you all of the descriptions of what your special tokens do and how many you're able to put on a character. They can range from negative status effects that you apply to your opponent, or they might be positive status effects that your character will actually utilize and go on your board, so you can pump up your abilities and make things stronger. You'll also have on the bottom right a spread of each of the symbols and how often they appear on the 5 dice that you are controlling. It does list 6 dice here. However, you do only get to, you do only play with 5 dice. It's just showing the different sequences because it does go from 1 to 6 number wise. However, in terms of actual dice, you do only have 5 dice total. And we'll get into sort of why that is later. But different characters will have different amounts of symbols on their sides. For example, I played Thor. Pyromancer here has 3 flames that they could possibly roll, 1 blaze, 1 fiery soul, and 1 meteor. However, Thor had 3 of one symbol that he could get, and 2 of another symbol that you could get, and then just 1 as the 6 symbol. So that it gives you an idea of, especially when you're trying to get certain combinations for your different abilities. Maybe you're just seeing you need to see how many symbols are on one dice to determine the chances of rolling what you need, or maybe seeing what your opponent might have to roll to actually destroy you. You'll of course also get all your different tokens that are unique to your character. Oh, also on the other side of the character, there again is the complexity level on the top left, a small biography of the character, sort of their weapon of choice description, who designed them. But there's also, more importantly, for every single character, there's a rules clarification. It's sort of an FAQ for every single character. Not only that, the game is pretty popular, so I found it was very, very easy to find what I need rule-wise. If there was any rule questions, it was easy to Google it. Either BoardGameGeek or Reddit pretty much always had the answer. I believe on their website they have a really, really in-depth FAQ there as well. Again, so rules-wise, it was very, very easy to pick up. But honestly, the rule book is quite small. There's only 15 pages in the rule book. It's extremely well laid out. They do an extremely good job with UX and just sort of user experience in terms of the way they design stuff like color coding. There is a decent amount to know. However, honestly, the rule book is so easy to read and so easy to pick up that my friend, I was able to teach this game without even having played it myself, just looking looking at videos online and stuff like that, and having one look at the rule book online, and it was easy peasy. So you have your sort of token descriptions and your tokens on what they do. You have your main board, and this is going to house all your 9 different abilities in the game. Again, might be different per character. However, 9 is sort of the default. You have 4 abilities on each side here, and then your ultimate ability in the center. And the ultimate ability is when you get all 6s as your dice roll for your attack. You can use your ultimate ability. Obviously, that is going to be your strongest ability, and it can't be defended in any way. So super, super cool there. And each one does a lot of unique things for each different character. You have your health and your combo point dials. Obviously, health is pretty self-explanatory. In a 1v1, you do start at 50 health. However, that can change depending on which format you're playing. If you're playing with multiple people, that'll change. Or if you're playing like 2v2, you actually share a 150 health pool. And then you have combat points, which are actually going to be used to fuel your cards. And we haven't got to that yet because I know I didn't mention it, even though I did mention this was sort of a Yahtzee dice battling game. Yes, there is a unique deck of cards for every single character that's actually pretty thick as well, which comes with a whole host of different things you can do to from changing up how dice rolls work. You can change the value of certain dice, whether it be your opponent's or yours. There might be there's instant speed stuff. So again, it's almost like Magic the Gathering, where there's like not only do you have cards and you have ways to interrupt your opponent's stuff, but there is even, like, if you look at the turn order, there is a main phase, a combat phase, and a main phase afterwards. So again, I'm pretty sure they took a little thing out of the old Magic the Gathering rulebook. This is a very, very nice little handy help sheet as well. A very, very cool one. And yeah. Not only do you have the dice, the cards can do a bunch of different stuff. So, I actually got, I think, one of each type of card here. You can have, again, the beautiful thing about this stuff, alluding to the sort of the user experience stuff, you can see that the different borders and the different colors, they actually correspond to the different phases in the game, at least for the important ones, like the main phase and the rolling phase is both blue and orange. You can see these two cards have blue and orange borders, so you just instantly know that these are the cards that you can only play during those phases. So again, Very, very excellent design there. I love it. You have the red cards, which are the instant speed stuff, so these can be played at any point in the game, really. And the active player getting priority. And then you also have cards like this, which are not cards that you use in the moment, but during your main phase you can actually play these and upgrade your pre-existing abilities. So this Molten Armor 3, if I actually paid 3 combat points, you can see on the left side there, 3 CP, you actually just lay it over your board and that becomes permanently an upgraded ability. Super, super cool. So yeah. And the name of the game is just, again, kill your opponent in different ways. Most of the game is going to be around dealing damage. However, there are different abilities that will let you draw cards, maybe, or they'll let you gain more CP. Shadow Thief, for example, has a ability where they can like fade into the shadows and not be targetable for a round. The Pyromancer will get these Fire Mastery cards, which she can expend to do additional damage, or maybe even apply burn tokens to do reoccurring damage every turn to the opponent. So there's a ton of different things that you can do with each character. And what I love about this game is it's just so simple, but it has enough decision making in there where it really feels like you have a lot of strategy behind it as well. And honestly, there is a decent amount of strategy in the game. I believe they do have like tournaments and championships for this game, so there is like a slight competitive scene for this game. However, I would say that again, even someone who's lower skill level can do a good amount of stuff even against higher skilled players. I'm someone who's definitely, I would consider myself a higher skilled player because I like to dive into strategies and stuff like that. But it was, we played a 5-player free-for-all and it was a really, really close game. It only came down to 3 people, and it came down to one person killing 2 people at the same time. And I actually could have won the game. However, I just had one bad roll and I ended up getting blown up by a powder keg from the Cursed Pirate. So just in general, to run through sort of a turn, you would have 4 cards in your starting hand. You start with 2 combat points in the game, and essentially it just goes income phase where you'll gain a CP, you'll draw a card from your deck, and then you will move on to the first main phase, which is you can play certain cards, for example, like the upgrading stuff that we alluded to earlier. In the left side, you can see which phase it'll go along with, as well as the border. So in the main phase, we could play different cards to upgrade our abilities or maybe gain CP, draw other stuff. And then you would move on to your offensive roll phase, where essentially, again, just like Yahtzee, you'd roll all 5 of your dice, and you'd see what combination of symbols or possibly numbers that will correspond to your abilities. So for example, this Burning Soul requires 2 5s, because the 5 side is the only one that has that symbol. However, the Fireball requires 3 flame symbols, which I actually do have. So just like Yahtzee, you do have inherent rerolls in the game, so you can reroll up to 2 times, and you can reroll any or all of your dice, any of your dice that you want to, really. Even if you roll the dice, let's say I set these aside and I just want to reroll these dice for my second reroll, and maybe I didn't like that, and so my third reroll, I could still go back to these dice and reroll those dice if I wanted to. However, let's just say I did all my 2 rerolls. I ended up with this that actually corresponds to this Fireball, the max level Fireball, because it's all 5 flame symbols. I will deal 8 damage to the opponent and gain 1 Fire Mastery token, which would just go on top of my character sheet like that, being able to utilize that in the future. And now because there are numbers on the dice as well, those will correspond to different things. Certain abilities might ask you to roll 2 dice and add the values together to do damage, or certain abilities will have either a small straight or a large straight, meaning, for example, if we rolled 1 2 3 4, I could actually apply that as my small straight using 4 of the dice. If I got 1 2 3 4 5, that would be a large straight. That would utilize all of my dice in a sequential order, and it doesn't have to be starting from 1. It could be 2 3 4 5 6 as well. That could correspond to a large straight, and that would essentially just be a better version of the other straight ability. So in between those rolls, of course, you could also use your CP for doing certain things like doing one more time. For example, let's say I didn't like any of those rolls, I could actually spend a CP in this card to re-roll to get an additional roll attempt on any up to 5 of my dice during the offensive roll phase, which is very, very cool. And during your opponent's turn, you could even interrupt them with your own roll cards. You know, select one of your opponent's dice and force them to re-roll it. You could also just instantly change the value of their stuff. So once I've chosen an ability, I would then offer it to my opponent and be like, hey, do you want to mess with my dice? And they could have the ability to, if they wanted to spend CP and cards, to augment that stuff to sort of interrupt that. If they did end up interrupting, like let's say they didn't want that full 5 cost fireball, they could change one of my dice to like a 6, for example. And this combination doesn't get me anything specific. However, it just still allows you to use whatever dice you have left over after that change, or whatever new combination you have to do something else. I actually do have the Pyroblast, you know, so obviously they might not want to change it to a 6, because that would unlock my Pyroblast. So there is a lot of actually trying to learn what your opponent does too, and that can be a little bit of a difficult thing, is because your opponent is going to also have their own unique abilities. So that is one of the harder things about learning this game, is figuring out what your opponents are doing and knowing what numbers and what symbols to change their dice to and stuff like that, and what they are able to do with their abilities. But that, of course, just comes with any game and just experience and learning. So let's say I did that attack and I hit my opponent. My opponent would actually have a defensive roll in the defensive roll phase, which is sort of the last step. Every single character in the bottom right has a green ability, and this is your defense roll. So there are different damage types in the game. I don't know if you can see very well in the camera here, but there's any damage symbol in a sort of a black circle, that's defendable damage, and anything in the red is undefendable. Defendable damage is sort of the basic damage. It just allows you to roll your defense roll. So this molten armor here, I'd roll my amount of dice it says, so I get to roll all 5 of my dice for this character. Some characters like Thor, for example, only roll 3 dice, and they have different things that they can do. They don't always mitigate damage. So Pyromancer in true glass cannon form gets 1 fire mastery token for each fire symbol and deals 1 damage back to the opponent for each, I guess, yellow fire symbol. There's 2 different fire symbols in the game. And so, yeah, we'd roll our dice. I got 1 yellow fire symbol and 2 burny fire symbols, and these ones will go away. So I'd actually be able to apply... I'd actually be able to get 2 fire mastery tokens for my character, and I would deal 1 damage back to the opponent. So again, not all characters will mitigate damage. Pyromancer is all about dealing damage, so that's what her defensive ability does. And some defense abilities will like gain you CP or trigger other special effects as well. And that would essentially end sort of the roll phase. Again, also for defensive rolls, you only roll once. Unlike when you're doing the offensive roll, you don't get 2 re-rolls for that. But doesn't mean you can't spend cards and stuff to re-roll defense rolls, because those can still be augmented as well. And then you would move on to another second main phase where you could play cards, like maybe you drew cards during your roll and stuff like that from triggering abilities. You could play more stuff here if you wanted to. You have a max hand size of 6, and then you would end up going to the discard phase at the very end. If you have more than 6 cards, you're forced to sell down to 6 cards, where you discard cards from your hand for 1 per CP. So you'd actually gain CP by discarding cards, and you can also do that on your own volition during the main phases as well. And that would essentially conclude a turn. As you can see, it's super, super easy. There are definitely some nuances when it comes to rule interactions, and that's definitely where you're going to need to dive into sort of the FAQs and stuff like that, or maybe the back of your character sheet to see any problematic rule interactions. But honestly, again, everything's so well laid out, so well designed, that it's super easy to pick up, and the game moves fairly quickly, at least for the most part. Again, I sort of wish I taught my friends 1v1 first. We did start with a 2v2 game and then move into the 5-player free-for-all. But the 5-player free-for-all definitely had a lot of downtime, I would say. I definitely am looking forward to playing this 1v1 with my friends. I think that's what we'll try next, because I heard that is sort of the main way to play the game. Doesn't mean that you can't enjoy a 5-player free-for-all. However, there are some different issues, I think, with the game that come up during the sort of the multiplayer stuff. Learn the game is very, very difficult, I think, just because there is sort of almost an illusion of too many choices. I think one way that I would mention to new players for this game is don't worry about reading every single ability and trying to plan for it right off the bat. Just always just go straight to rolling your first dice, and then from what you get from your first roll, then you can start looking at your abilities and figuring out what you want to go for from there. I think that was sort of the issue with my friends, is even before they rolled their first roll, they were looking at their abilities, they were looking at their cards, figuring out what they were trying to get there, and then that just spent a lot of time. Like one round almost took us half an hour in the 5-player free-for-all, just because certain players are going to be learning these types of games at different paces. Obviously, my turns went a lot quicker than some other ones because I just am more experienced with rules and learning the game and stuff like that. So if you do have players in your group that are slower to pick up on stuff like this and maybe get sort of analysis paralysis, I would definitely recommend them learn that way. Just chuck the dice, see what lands, and then from there move into looking at your different abilities. But yeah, that is it. Again, I love this game. I definitely instantly fell in love with this game. I'm probably going to be picking up more boxes. It's probably going to end up like an Arkham Horror situation where I definitely want to get extra stuff for it. Again, I put in a request for review copies for Dice Throne Adventures and Dice Throne Marvel Missions. So hopefully I can get at least one of those, because I would love to show that off on the channel, and I would love also to just have a solo mode I could play with this game, because unfortunately that is one of the big downsides to this game for any solo players out there, is that the base game is not soloable at all. Some people will play the game against themselves, and they'll try to figure out the best combination, and that might actually be a good way to learn the game if you play yourself, but it obviously isn't the same experience as playing with someone else. But that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my little splurge on Dice Throne. Again, I just want to introduce this game to someone that might not have heard of it before, or maybe was on the fence like I was many years ago and wasn't sure if it was the right game for them. But hopefully this sort of shed some light on some of the mechanics and sort of how it plays, and maybe that swayed you to pick it up yourself, because it's a pretty easy barrier of entry. Again, one box is about 35 bucks Canadian, and that will get you towards just playing right away with a friend. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.